All right, guys, we got another great treat here. We got another interview with a now graduate assistant and coach KT Harrell. He played on the team for 3 years, or you sat out 1 year and then played 2 years, right? For the first year
Right.
of the Bruce Pearl team you were on. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year at Brew Tech, sixth in single season scoring at Auburn all time, second in free throw percentage at Auburn at 83.9%, which I think is a big deal. 2015 SEC scoring champ, 2015 second team All SEC. KT, welcome.
Man, golly, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
You like hearing
It.
the accolades, on
Yeah,
there?
we should just stop the recording there and the interview's over.
Well, we're hoping that, hopefully you'll be keeping on adding to that. You're back graduate assistant. Hopefully, the season's going well. We might have to add some things to it by the end of the season,
And absolutely.
Well, we'll get into the questions here, so we won't waste too much time. But I'm from Montgomery, also, which I don't know if that's a 334,
Yes,
And
sir.
so I know you were in high school there at Brew Tech, and Barbie was the coach at the time. What went into kind of your recruitment? I know you ended up at Virginia. So, what did you think about Auburn while you were in high school?
Actually, I was recruited by Lebo, who was actually the coach before Barbie. I actually came on an official visit. I actually saw Auburn Arena as it was being built. Yeah, I feel old when I say that. But yeah, so Lebo actually recruited me. But in high school, I'd always wanted to play in the ACC and wanted to get out of the state of Alabama. A lot of the guys that I grew up watching in Montgomery, most of those guys went out of the state to play college ball. Besides, you might be familiar with Michael Green.
Oh, yeah. Went to St. Jude, right?
Right.
I watched him play in high school. He played in my high school, and I got to, I didn't get to play. I didn't play. I wasn't any good, but I got to watch some legends play.
Right. Yeah, man. So besides him, the guys that I grew up admiring and watching, they left. Courtney Fortson went to Arkansas. Varez Ward went to Texas originally before he transferred to Auburn, but those guys all left. And I sort of wanted to sort of follow that blueprint because I thought that at that time it would give me the best chance to be in the NBA. That was my ultimate goal. So, I left and I went to UVA, but I found my way back home, back here at Auburn.
Yeah, tell us about that process, right? It's such a different time now with transfers. Yeah, it looks completely different than what it looked like for you. You were at UVA with Coach Bennett for a couple of years, right? And then you make the decision to come back. Maybe give people some insight into what that year, off, quote, it's not a year off, as you know, but what goes into that year sitting out when you're coming back home to a place like Auburn?
Yeah, it was difficult. It was, the thing that you love the most, at that time, what I felt like I loved the most was taken away from me because of a decision that I made that I thought was in my best interest. And it's just difficult, man. You get to practice, but you can't travel, you can't play. So all I had, man, was the gym. I would work on my game constantly. It definitely fueled me to try to be the best player I could be when I got a chance to get back on the floor. But it was difficult, man. I see my teammates and they're out there competing, and I always wanted to be out there with them. I always wanted to be out there with them because I was practicing every day. I was putting in the grind. I was putting in the effort to be a better player, but I wasn't reaping the benefits of actually going to play. That's what the game's all about. Yeah, you practice to get better, but the game is that's what you're in it for, to play. And it was difficult. That whole year was difficult. And the transfer portal now, it's like guys are transferring left and right, and there's no repercussions for it. And I, my personal opinion, rightfully so, guys, want to make the best decision for them, just like coaches do. They should be able to. They should be able to do what they want to do. But now, back when I was playing, transferring, you got to sit out. You got to sit out. So it was a definite.
Was coming home the main thing for you? What
did Barbie recruit? It was a Barbie that recruited you back, or?
Yeah. He gave me a call. He came to my house. We talked, and that whole recruiting spiel. It was sort of the same before I decided to, commit to Virginia. It was pretty much the same type deal. So yeah.
Well, I feel like you can almost put the Auburn basketball fans, are the tiers at this point. There's kind of Bruce Pearl when he first got there, about a third of the fan base, like as a whole, that is now kind of jumped on. So, all right, we got Bruce Pearl now. this is going to be legit. I'm investing. And then you had another third that kind of jumped on in that Final Four run or the SEC regular season run, that kind of era. And they don't know much about that first era. And now you have like another third that is fully like those people that just did not care about basketball. They are fully in now. That's number one ranking. Everyone that's ever called themselves an Auburn fan is in there. But a lot of people, I wanted to know, you were on that first tier, that SEC tournament run, all that. What do fans that are just now getting into it need to know about those like early Bruce Pearl days, that first like tier that set the foundation?
If anything, for the fans that don't know much about those teams, when I say team, well, our first team is that, we weren't the most talented team. We, in terms of the teams that we played against in the SEC, almost every team had an NBA guy, and we definitely had a kind of joke with some of my teammates, like we had no business winning those 3 games with the team that we had. It was all just no quit, 100% effort, all the things that BP teaches. Like, we took that attitude into those 3 games, and that's why we were able to be successful. And so if it was anything that the fans should know, is that the same chip that you see with the teams that you see now is what started it. And then BP, after, one thing that I remember the most is him saying that we laid that foundation for that. And that'll probably be one of the most memorable moments for me.
What was it like? You were on the team, you were recruited by Lebo, you transfer into Barbie, and your final season, Bruce Pearl comes on. Like, what was that moment when you heard Bruce Pearl was coming? Like, I know you were in like a video and things. Like, what was that moment like? What did you think about Bruce Pearl?
Just excitement. I remember growing up and watching him at Tennessee with some of the guys. I love watching Scotty Hobson play. A lot of the teams that he had were just amazing. And he always has been a premier coach. So the fact that we were able to get him to Auburn wanted to shock me, because I was like, he wants to come to Auburn like that. Like, in my mind, I couldn't fathom it, because everybody on the team knew who Bruce Pearl was. So initially it was just excitement, man. It was excitement and wanting to sit down with him, wanting to talk with him, and it was just excitement, pure excitement.
Did you get to talk to him in the first like 2 or 3 months? I know there was like a lot of stuff about like he couldn't recruit for 2 or 3 months, like his show calls wasn't quite up.
I don't remember, man. I don't think so. I can't.
Who ran the practices? Like, who kind of in that meantime while you waited? Like, we know who our head coach is. We can't like.
Yeah. I couldn't even sit here and tell you who was running, but I don't really remember. I do remember doing a lot of individual workouts with the assistant coaches. I remember doing that, but I don't remember when our first like official team practice was. It was a while ago, man. I couldn't even tell you.
I feel that.
You mentioned that tournament run that maybe you said you had no business doing. I remember that really well. I was actually living in Nashville and caught at least 1, maybe 2 of those 3 games. And I remember, obviously, I think if most fans who were watching Auburn basketball back then, they're going to remember you for that game-tying shot against LSU that eventually led to an overtime win. Now, I would argue, just from watching you game in and game out that year, I think you and a couple other guys really set the foundation strong just every day, doing the little things every game, going out and busting it and playing hard and instilling that culture like you talked about. But just tell us about that shot, that 3-day experience in Nashville, and what that meant for you and those guys to like have something at the end of the year to be proud of. And that Kentucky semifinal game was such like a gargantuan task. But just tell us a little bit about that experience and how great it was after the tough year to finish off that way.
By far, that was the thing that made that so special, is because like during that year, I think we finished second to last in SEC. And we hadn't experienced much joy during that season. It was a lot of ups and downs. My teammate Antoine Mason, he lost his dad right before we played against. Like, there was just a lot of up and down emotions during that season. And but we stayed the course. We continued to work hard. Like I said, we definitely weren't the most talented team in SEC at the time, but we always came to work prepared. We worked hard. We believed in each other. We believed in BP. We believed in our coaching staff, and we stayed the course. And I just remember after we beat LSU, the amount of joy that we felt after that. I'll never forget that amount of joy that we had, because we hadn't felt that all season. We had moments we won and we were happy, but that joy is something special, and I'll never forget it.
You finally had something to celebrate for the first time in a couple of years, right?
Yeah, Auburn basketball. I mean, Auburn basketball as a whole had something to celebrate, man. Like they hadn't had that for so long, you know. And I remember hitting the shot. After I hit the shot, and I look into the like, it was ridiculous. I remember seeing Kentucky fans screaming and clapping. Like it was crazy, man. It was crazy, and like to feel to be a part of that, and for us to have that success, and to see where we are now. And for BP, and remember him saying, y'all laid the foundation. So when we look at the success that we're having now, I feel so blessed to be a part of it. You know, I really do.
And, kind of talking about, I saw a video the first time when Bruce Pearl came and you took over a classroom. Like it was kind of a funny skit where you stuck your head in the door and said, is this the student section meeting? And then the band guy stuck his head, is this the student section meeting? Then finally the band comes down, everybody's in there, and you're in there with Bruce Pearl, and you're talking this business class. I used to have like classes in that same exact building, and you're talking into the business class people saying, please come out to our games, please come to the student section. And things have changed quite a lot since then, right? Now people are camping out for the chance to see people play in Auburn basketball. Can you tell us like what the like highest moments you had in the jungle, and what are like the lowest moments you had in the jungle?
Yeah, well, I'm not gonna give you the lowest moments, because I could point at a whole bunch of low moments, man. I didn't win a lot here. I was blessed to have the success that we had in the SEC tournament, but I had a lot of low moments. But I think, for me, the best moments were just, by far the best moment I had was in the SEC tournament. Just to be able to say that we left our mark, and we sort of laid that foundation, sort of the blueprint of what it means to be Auburn basketball, to not quit, to not give up, to fight through adversity, to have unbelievable belief in yourself and in your teammates, even when others doubt you. And we showed that. We showed that, as far as the fans and that whole video of me going into the classroom, that I saw that the other day, and I completely forgot about that until I saw it, and I was like, wow, I do remember me and BP going there, and I'm going, and he like told me to go back in. I actually walked in the class, asked him, is this where whatever blah 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 is supposed to be, and I walked out, and then BP told me to go back in and do it again. Like, funny thing about BP is like he's a visionary, and I when I look at that video, I can see what he saw this program to be. I could see what he wanted this program to be, and everything that he talked about doing, everything that he said he was going to do, he did it. He did it, and we're not finished yet. But I'm just saying, everything that he said he was going to do, he's done it. And just watching that video just reminded me of the vision that he had for this program.
No one's better for Auburn than Bruce Pearl. The marketing, the branding, like it's all the things you needed as an Auburn, like to get Auburn engaged. He did them all. It was
no question.
As a lifelong, like my dad went to Auburn in the 80s, so I was just brainwashed from a young age. And I grew up playing basketball, so basketball's always been my favorite sport. And when I saw that video, KT, of you and that whole skit, like it actually brought emotions out of me, because Bruce believed when he had a vision when no one else did, and he sold you guys on it, and he got a staff in that bought into that vision, and it's amazing.
It's amazing. People that, like you were talking about, those tier fans, those fans who were there to feel all that, know like where this all started and to where it is now. And if you think about it, and you have that emotional attachment to Auburn basketball and the program, then of course it's gonna make you feel emotional. Because I mean, if you look at the video, people in the video, BP's like, how many of you guys know who KT Harrell is? And people like, yeah, kind of. Nobody knew who I was in there. It was funny. I didn't, at the time, I was like, yeah, nobody knows who I am. Now looking back at it, like, who cares? It was nobody should have known who I was. Our basketball program had been bad for years. But BP always believed that, even though we weren't the most talented, he always believed that we could win any game that we played. He thought that we could win any game. He always had belief in his players and his coaching staff and in his team. And, and that's why we were able to have the success towards the end. But like I said, man, BP he's done such an amazing job with this program. He has.
when you were a player, you could go into a classroom and the head coach of the basketball team could come there and say, who knows KT Harrell? And most of them didn't. These days, Jabari Smith, Walker Kessler, Wendell Green, what is it like for those guys now? They're like celebrities, like statewide, not just on campus.
Those guys are walk-ons too. Lior, Chandler, Preston, Chase, Tyler. They'll know those guys too. They're from top to bottom. I mean, it's the culture that is. It's the culture that is a part of Auburn basketball now. It's nothing like it. It's never been like that before, but it is here now, and it's here to stay.
Well, you probably have a unique perspective. Like I've noticed, just the fan base is so much more, for lack of a better term, just basketball IQ is just completely different than 5 or 10 years ago in terms of how the fans interact and even how people just talk on message boards and like you just
social media. Our Auburn Twitter fan base is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I love it.
We always can gush about BP. We love him obviously for what he's done, for our alma mater and all that. But so you were a player and you're a assistant under him now. I'm always curious with coaches and teachers, like I think we've heard a lot of the things through video over the years, but from your perspective, like what are if you had to pick 2 or 3 things that he just harps on, he focuses on with the players, how does he get them? I've always been impressed with his team. You talked about his Tennessee team with effort and energy. I mean, what are the things you heard him constantly saying when you were a player and now being around this team? Like what are his core pillars, I guess you could say, of his coaching philosophy in your opinion?
I think I'll give you one. The one that for me, what I hear him say constantly, and it's a consistent message every single day. I'll give you 2 things. One is do the things that you need to do to give God a chance to bless you. And that means in terms of your work ethic, the things you're doing off the court, your habits. It doesn't mean that when you work that those things are going to happen, but if you don't do it, God definitely isn't going to bless that. It's one of the things that I hear from him on a daily basis. The next thing is do everything you do with passion and purpose. A lot of things that we do, they don't work without energy and effort. And so those 2 things right there are his main focus. Now you dive into X's and O's and stuff like that, but in terms of his core, beliefs, he preaches that every single day. And our guys, they do a good job of hearing it and applying it to their lives.
Yeah, it's been a while since you were a player for him. Is there anything that he did back then that he's kind of changed now, like something he's grown in himself or something that he's like maybe with a different set of players that are a little more talented, like how things have changed in his coaching?
I mean, from the year that I was here until now, I'm sure BP has changed. I don't think anybody, I think we all kind of change over time. You don't want to just stay constant your entire life in general. And whether you're coaching or whatever you're doing, I think his core values have remained the same because we all have, certain core values that we believe, and those things usually never change. But in terms of his coaching strategy and stuff like that, I'm sure things have changed over time. I mean, there's some plays that we run now that we never ran when I was here. I think, and that has to do with the level of talent, the guys that you bring in on your team. You got to adjust. And I think he's done a great job of doing that. And, our players have, the level of talent. You're only as good as the talent that you have. You know what I mean? And so there's only so many things. Not only that, there's only so many things that you can do with the talent that you have. If you're not super talented, you can't run all these different sets and different plays to get other guys shot. So he's definitely adapted over time.
I can tell you one thing that's changed: no more sweaty suits. He used to be known for getting his suits all sweaty. Where'd they go?
I think that had a lot to do with his choice to not want to wear suits. I mean, he probably had to have 2 or 3 different suits every game. He's sweating through them all. And I'm glad it's like short sleeve shirt. He's pretty good with the short sleeve shirt. But when we wear the long sleeve, he looks like he's about ready to sweat through that too. So got to start maybe packing him an extra shirt.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Montgomery, and I wanted to get out of Montgomery. I think you wanted to get out of Montgomery too and go to Virginia. I've moved different places. I've lived in other countries, but you're another level. You were born in Germany. You lived in Montgomery. You went to Virginia. You came back to Auburn. You went to Belgium. You went to Italy. You went to Turkey. What brought you all the way back? Like, how did you end up back at Auburn after all those moves? You could have been anywhere, and you decided to come back to Auburn.
It's home, man. It's home. My family's right down the street, but Auburn is home, man. It's where I grew up as a man. I found my wife here, like it's home. It's home, man. The minute that I decided to stop playing, and I wasn't even really sure that I was really done playing, but when I came to a game and I saw BP and he kind of asked me what I wanted to do when I was done playing, I said, Coach, I think I want to get into coaching. And, right then and there, he was just like, I'll hire you as a grad assistant as soon as you decide. And when I went back to Florida, because we were living in Florida at the time, I told my wife, I'm like, I think this is what God wants me to do. I was struggling with wanting to either go back overseas or G League or different things. And it was just like, for me, I have to be fully invested. I have to know that whatever I do, I'm going to attack it with a purpose. I'm going to be in the gym all the time. That was the type of player I was. I wanted to be in the gym. I just didn't have that level of want anymore, that want to get back in the gym and be in there constantly. And if I wasn't going to be that guy that was going to be a workhorse and be in the gym, then I just didn't want to do it. And so BP gave me an opportunity, man, and I jumped on it. I jumped on it, and I'm so glad that I did. I'm glad to be home and be back part of this program.
Have you talked to any other former Auburn players that have gone abroad? I feel like I watched a video of you talking about how you have to do things yourself. You have to be very self-disciplined. Have you talked to any other former player? I know Javon McCormick, I believe, is in Turkey or Germany right now.
I talked to him one time when he came, when he was in Auburn, but I don't, so a lot of those guys I don't really have real relationships with because they came a little bit after me and I was playing overseas, so I never really got to interact with them. I talked to Bryce when he had came down for a little bit, saw Jared once, but a lot of those guys, I talked to some of my teammates. Sim had been overseas. Casey Ross Miller was overseas. Malcolm Canada was overseas. Even Jordan had been overseas. I think he was in Australia 1 year. So I talked to a couple of my teammates who had been over there. But yeah, it's a grind, man. Playing overseas isn't for the faint of heart. You got to be one. You got to be self-sufficient, and you have to have an understanding. In some places, they're not going to know a lick of English, and you're going to have to be able to get where you need to go without really having any help. You got to figure it out on your own. I had to do a lot. I grew up a lot when I went out to Turkey. I love Italy. Italy by far was my favorite place to play. But Turkey was a different beast, man. That was a different beast for me. I grew up a lot. It was crazy.
Did you have some culture shock over there in Turkey? Was there any foods you missed or
Man, I could get that. That's a whole different interview, probably.
We'll have to do a second round sometime.
Yeah, that's a whole different interview, man. It was rough. It was rough. One quick story. I remember pulling up to my apartment, and it was this big. It was a big building, but it was old. It was kind of run down, and there was 2 or 3 abandoned buildings. They were halfway built. It was crazy, man. And I was like, this is what it's like. I thought to myself, this is overseas and I don't think I want to do this anymore, but I'm glad that I did, man. It made me grow up so much. It made me think about, what my parents and many others in the military have to do, being overseas away from their families for, however long they have to be. It made me grow up and it made me appreciate being here.
Well, give us a little idea. We always hear the grad assistant thing thrown out in basketball and in other sports. I think a lot of people would be curious to know, just in season, day to day, what are some of the things you're working on with the guys and with the coaching staff, and just kind of how do you and Marquise and other guys who have filled that role in the past, what does that look like at this level of basketball?
The grad assistant job, you really don't get to do. You can't be coaching in any capacity. So I can't coach. I can only, it's almost as if I'm a manager, glorified manager, if you will. So I can rebound for the guys, but I can't be coaching them like the coaches do. I'm not involved in recruiting in any way. I can do scouting and personnel and stuff like that, but I got to give that to the coaches and they have to deliver that message. So a lot of my stuff is just absorbing, man, and learning. And I've learned so much. I've absorbed so many information from the time that I got here to the time now. Learned so much from the coaching staff. I've learned so much from the players, man, just being on the other side of things. I'm able to connect with them and talk to them about different things. Like I said, I can't coach them, but I can talk to them about certain things, and just to see how how different guys need different things. And I think you got to be able to have that understanding as a coach. And so it's just been fun. It's just been super fun to be on the other side of things. I was worried at first because I just didn't know because I just didn't know what to expect. I've always been a player all my life. I never thought about coaching. I never thought that I would ever be a coach. But the transition has been smooth because I feel like I know how to develop relationships with people really well. And I've been able to do that with almost pretty much all our guys. They know that they can come to me with anything if they need anything. They want to talk about anything, and it's made the transition so much better from player to now coach. So,
do you feel like there's
oh, go ahead, Jackson. Go ahead.
Do you feel like there's a certain like coach or anything that you really feel like you're absorbing the most from? Any like guys you're modeling? You're learning right now, kind of like a student, right? So who do you feel like your main like professor?
I feel like I've learned from all of them, man. If I had to choose, I mean, BP obviously is the head coach, and so he's going to do the most talking, and I'm going to hear him the most. But I've learned from Coach Flanagan. I've learned from Coach Bowman. I've learned from Coach Stephen Pearl, who is also a coach, and Coach Pruitt, who both those guys were on staff when I was a player. I've been, the list goes on. Ian, our film guy, Mike Burgomaster. Like I've learned from all these guys. You know what I'm saying? And so even Marquise, I've learned our entire coaching staff has made such an imprint on me. And I'm glad I get to work with them and learn from them each and every day. So it's been amazing.
Now, is it an NCAA rule, or is it like a organizational rule? Like you talked about how you can't coach, you can't say certain messages to them. Is this like
it's an SEC rule, but I'm pretty sure it's an SEC rule. There are certain things that are SEC rule, but I think that's an NCAA rule where the grad assistant can't be involved in coaching in any way, because you have a certain amount of guys who can actually coach. So, and before we go on, I take that back with Ian saying he's a film guy, because he hates that when people call him the film guy. So I'm sorry.
What is he? What do you call him?
Coach. He is a coach. So is Burgo. So.
Well, tell Coach Ian to come on sometime. We can talk all about coaching. He can, if people are saying something wrong, he can come set the record straight on the podcast.
That was funny because he got on me one time saying he's a film guy. He was mad. I like messing with him.
Yeah. Well,
I always love hearing about, BP is so good about giving credit to all those assistants on their scouts. Kind of as a basketball nerd, I'm always curious to watch what we do game to game, whether that's offensively, defensively. It's just clear that Auburn, since Bruce has gotten here, just always has a game plan that is coherent and it makes sense.
Yeah, BP said it, I think, the other day in the film. He was like, no matter what level you go to after this, you will not be as prepared for a game as you are here. Like the amount that we watch, the detail, how detailed we are with things. That's what I've learned the most, just how detailed we are, and how like we don't rush through things. We don't rush through things. We go from step by step by step in order to get to where we need to go. And I think that it's just been helpful to our players.
I think Jay Billis mentioned that during the Alabama game. It was somebody, I think it was Jay. He said, I don't know if he sat in on a film session or just talked to me about it, but he just said he was blown away with how much that the coaches are putting in front of the players. But he also just said, look, if those players are internalizing all that and getting that, what Jackson and I talk on the podcast all the time, we get to celebrate these wins for a day or two and just kind of move on, like that Kentucky, Missouri back-to-back, right? You had that high of Kentucky, and then y'all are immediately moving on and traveling.
Right back to work. Yeah, man, right back to work. You get one, you celebrate for that night, that day, but you're right back to work the next day preparing, and that's what we do. I mean, there's a reason why we're the number one team in the country. You can't do it without preparation. You can't do it without details. You can have talent, but it's what you're doing with the talent. Like, what is the information that you're giving to these players in order that way they can go out there and execute it properly? Like, I think that's why we've been so efficient. That's why we're the best team in the country, and we continue to do those things and build off those things. Continue to just work each day to get better. That's what BP has always been telling our guys, and then we'll continue to have success.
You think that work ethic and that the way these personalities have come together has been the biggest reason this team has surpassed all expectations so far this year? I mean, from your view, from kind of being around the team but not necessarily coaching, like, is it the off the court stuff that is just way more important than maybe us fans think when it comes to winning, or are there things you've seen with this group that have been really special?
For me, I think one of the things that a lot of the fans probably already know, especially our fans already know, but if you don't know, is that this team has an incredible chip on their shoulder as a group. Even though we're the number one team in the country, they still don't feel like people believe it, which is a great thing. Like, I think that's an amazing thing, because as a player, you should always have something that's driving you. You have to have that fuel. And I think they use it. It's the reason why KD scores one bucket and he's losing his mind. He's not just being crazy for no reason. It's because he feels like nobody believes in him. Now, he knows us as a coaching staff, his teammates, his fans, he knows, but he just has that chip. So does Wendell. So does, from top to bottom, they all have a chip on their shoulder. And it's what makes this team so great. It's why they guard the way they do. It's why they execute offense the way they do. And they still have room to grow and get better, which is even scarier. But they have an incredible chip on their shoulder. And I think that's why they've been able to have the success that they have, because they feel like it's them against the world. And I think that's what makes them, it's what drives them and makes them successful.
Do you feel like this team, number one team, you talk about the chip on the shoulder and all that, do you feel like, a lot of it's motivation? Can you stay motivated through all these different games and things like that? If there is a next step for this team, what is it? Like, what is something this team or certain players need to finish off to really take that next step, if there even is a next step?
I think the next step for this team is exactly what BP keeps telling them, is get better each day. That's our next step. The next day, let's get better. The next day, let's get better. That is our next step. Each and every day, we need to come into work, come into practice, thinking there's another opportunity to get better. I think if we continue to do that, then we're going to be really happy about the results at the end of the season. And so for us, I think we shouldn't look too far ahead. We should just be where our feet are. And then when the next day comes, we focus on getting better each and every day. And I think that the rest will take care of itself. I'm a firm believer in what BP says, do the things that will give God a chance, that will help give God a chance to bless you. And so we focus on that. We continue to work to get better. That stuff will take care of itself.
We have an ongoing debate on this podcast. We asked Sonny Smith, and we're going to ask everybody we get on this podcast. So there's big time moments in the games or whatever. There's two big things that we seem to do every game that's big momentum shifters: the Cambridge alley-oop in transition and the Wendell Green logo three. In your opinion, what is a bigger momentum shift in the game, the Wendell logo or the Cambridge oop?
Wendell probably get mad at me for saying this, but getting a lob, and Wynn does a great job of getting in the paint, attacking the big and making him commit and throwing that ball in the air. So he's a part of it. But obviously when you dunk the ball, there's not the crowd goes insane. They go insane. And so that definitely is a momentum shifter, but it doesn't take away how far and how, electric it is when you see the smallest guy on the court shooting it from almost half court. Come on, man. That's amazing too. They're both great. But of course, when you get a guy, you throw him a lob and he's about to tear the rim down, of course, it's going to make the crowd go nuts. And then it's definitely a momentum shift for sure. So I would say that.
Well, Sonny agrees with you. He also picked Cambridge. And here's another one for you. Now you're a coach. I'm a big proponent. It's really interesting to watch that lots of coaches, pretty much every coach in college basketball, the crowd's going nuts. Their opponents just hit a big three. You're away. Heat check timeout. Bruce Pearl almost never does that. What are your thoughts on heat check timeout?
What's crazy? I think one of the first things that BP had said in our first meeting when he first got here was I'm not gonna call timeouts. Like, I'm not gonna call timeouts when they're going on the run. So I mean I think that kind of shocked them originally, like in our first couple games. Like, why won't he call timeout? If he's not gonna call a timeout, like he's gonna let this other team go on and run because they're tired too. They're tired too, and we're gonna push through that fatigue. And I think it's a great strategy, it's a great game plan.
Well, Sonny agrees with you on that one too. And me and Matt have gone back and forth, and that's a great nugget to find out that he said that in an early meeting, because Matt and me ended up talking about heat check timeouts a good bit.
Yeah. He won't call it. He won't call it. He just wouldn't. I remember being a player wishing that he would call it. I mean, I wasn't on any of these these later teams where you got, just talent across the board. So maybe a timeout or two would have helped us.
I love it personally, especially like you said with this team. I mean, our depth is I personally think the depth of this Auburn team is just the reason for a lot of the success. So many weapons, and if he wants to wear the other team down with pace and with energy, you don't want to stop it. And if you're on the road, when you call that timeout, nothing gets the other fan base more excited than the fact that you called timeout.
Not even more. You're absolutely right. Right.
Well, we won't keep you on forever. Here's my final question. Do you keep up with Simeon Bowers, and would he ever be interested in coming on the podcast?
I saw Sim at the game, man. I saw him at the game, our last game, Alabama game. I didn't get the chance to talk to him, man, but I'm sure he would. I'm sure he would love to come on the podcast. I could text him and let him know if you guys want to. I could definitely do that, man. I could text him a text. I wish I could have saw him after the game. I think he ended up having to leave, but yeah, man, I'll make sure to send him a text and get back to you guys with that.
Sim's kind of a cult hero for the fans of that generation. Like, he was such a fun, fascinating play. Like, I still don't know if I've ever seen a player quite like him with his skill set at his size.
Yeah, I see him taking the ball off the rebound and just pushing it all the way.
Every time, man. Every time. We used to get – it was crazy because sometimes you'd finish those off and you'd be like, wow, that guy's got something special. And then other times he would end up ticking up too early and he would finger roll it from the free throw line and get blocked. It was crazy.
Tim's favorite moves, he would get the ball, he would get it off the fast break, and he did this multiple games. He would get it, take it all the way. He would take one dribble, go behind his back with the ball, and then he would always do that. Always do it. And people would never they would never try, they could never take it, but he would always do it. And he'd make it sometimes but it hit, I mean, that's
How
him.
often were you sitting there ready to hit a three and Simeon just blows by you and you're like, okay.
I probably didn't even try to spot up. I just knew he was going to go all the way. Yeah.
Oh, man, we'll have to see if we can get him on. Yeah. Anything you could do on that one. We'd love that. We're big, huge fans, and we just started this podcast the beginning of the season because me and Matt, we used to call each other after every game and would talk about the sport. Just let's record it. Let's just record it from now on, and we just ended up with this magical season so far. And the fact that we can get KT Harrell to come on our podcast and Sonny Smith and potentially other players is just, it's all amazing for us. This is just fun, Man,
I'm blessed y'all allowed me to be on the podcast, man. So I'm appreciative, really.
Yeah. Well, thank you, War Eagle, and we'll see you out there coaching.
Yeah, man, War Eagle.
War Eagle. Thanks, KT.
Yeah, man, no problem.